Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Energy Network webinar. This is a quarterly event, so thank you so much for joining. A couple of you have joined for every single one, and we've been having this for close to 3 years now. So I really appreciate and love the support. And to anyone who is new, well, welcome, and hopefully you join many more in the future. These have been designed as a knowledge sharing platform. As we all know, it's so difficult to stay on top of your day-to-day job, what's happening in the industry, new technologies, and just trying to understand it from a whole perspective. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and we'll give you something to think about. You'll gain some more knowledge, you'll learn something, and if you do feel like there's anyone who might enjoy these webinars or might be interested in them, please feel free to send the recording, which you'll get at the end of this, and pass it along. And also don't worry about taking notes because you'll get the recording. And if there are any questions, then drop them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. And then at the end of the webinar, I will read them out to Mick and we'll answer them accordingly. So the agenda for today, first up, we're going to talk about the real examples within real-world incidents and what's actually happened. A lot of companies, they often are always on the mindset of, it won't happen to me, that'll never be me. But then they end up on lists and example lists like this. So the reason why I want to do this is just to get you to understand that it can happen to the biggest companies within the UK and government organizations. Next up, we're talking about the overlap between cybersecurity threats and health and safety. Often the two aren't associated together. You often think of them as separate, but a cybersecurity attack can have massive implications and damages to health and safety. Imagine, for example, Thames Water were to be hacked, or imagine the NHS were to be hacked. What would happen then? The consequences could be significant. When doing a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, are you having cybersecurity as an afterthought, or you may be thinking of it towards the end of your planning? We think that it should be done as the fundamental core, and then everything should be built on top of that. And then every plan or your continuity systems, they should all link back to cybersecurity, and you build from there. We're going to talk about the shared nature of cybersecurity attacks across sectors, especially within the UK. In the last couple of years, we have noticed similar threats, motivation, consequences, and a lot of themes all very similar. The reason why we decided to bring this up is that maybe one of those motivations or one of those consequences, they might strike a chord with you and say, oh, that could be us. We could be someone where there's motivation to be attacked. It's just to get you thinking of where your business might fall into and what sort of threats you might incur. We're also going to talk about how Bedroq assesses and understands cybersecurity risks. Often a lot of companies, they don't do cybersecurity risk assessments, and they don't fully understand where their risks are. They might think they have the best cybersecurity posture in the world, but the organizations could be so big that there could be departments that you don't even know about. They could be a risk or a threat. What we always think is valuable is that why don't you get a third party to come help you view it from an unbiased perspective and provide that insight. You might already know the answers, but at least you've double checked it. If something were to happen, you can prove that you've done your due diligence. And then we're going to talk about what's next. So what will be the next webinar in this series? And before I carry on, I'm going to hand it over to Mick, and he's going to explain all of the above to you in a bit more detail.
Thank you very much, Dylan. So yes, this is the second in the series, as Dylan said. In the first webinar, for those that didn't attend, we gave an introduction into cybersecurity, how the unique challenges of the sector, key differences between how IT and OT operate. We also looked at the standards that govern IT systems, how they're secured, and as well as looking at standards that are more applicable to you guys who work in energy, such as the NCSE's CAF, 62443, and how they're used to define how an energy site or system, that certainly those that maybe even cover wider geographical areas such as offshore wind farms, can be secured. Since that webinar, I've been lucky enough to attend the NCSC Cyber UK 2025 conference. And obviously been quite a lot in the last few months been going on in the cyber world. So yeah, lots of information, lots of insight from there as well in terms of what's going on in the current climate. So certainly some really interesting times and some really good and valuable information and things to share with people today. So yeah, let's have a little look at some real world insights that have been happening. If anyone attended the last webinar, they'll be aware of this slide because I shared it last time. Certainly in terms of some of the key things here, it's to note that there are attacks that are specifically designed to target your HMIs using these protocols such as IEC 101, 104, 61850, and using OPC to communicate with your RTUs and PLCs, using that to obtain information and just sitting there and just learning, but also the potential to cause damage too. We're certainly aware that certainly since 2022, the escalation of conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the lead up to it as well, that things like DDoS attacks that are originating from Russia have risen by 450%. So there's a big increase in warfare in other areas. So yeah, there's certainly countries that we're aware of, and probably you guys are aware of, that do remain a threat. Some of them are prevalent in the news, some of them less so, but they're just as important that we are aware of those, just because they're not in the news as much. So yeah, let's have a look at a couple of examples. The Colonial Pipeline that happened in 2021. Some threat actors called DarkSide gained access to their pipeline, which is oil essentially. They described their motives as monetary, as is the way with a lot of these, and they gained access via a compromised VPN password, and we'll talk about those and how that can happen in a few slides time. But yeah, partly also due to the fact they weren't using any multi-factor authentication. It just wasn't in place for people accessing data. Within 2 hours, they managed to make off with 100 gigabytes of data. And as is the way with these things, we take the data and then we encrypt the whole thing with ransomware. So we've got two really good reasons why people might want to try and pay that ransom. The impact there is lost money due to the business interruptions. They shut that pipeline down for 5 days. And a lot of with what you guys are doing, you can't take the risk. What systems have been compromised? Which ones are safe and not safe anymore? Do we trust any of our systems that are running? So it shut down for 5 days. So they got a lot of lost revenue from that being down, reputational damage, which included some civil lawsuits. And of course, then, despite those lawsuits being unsuccessful, they still had $1 million in civil penalties. So yeah, lots of implications from having an incident. A little bit closer to home. In 2022, there was an attack on South Staffordshire Water. The actual threat actors involved in this, who claimed it, was Klopp. They thought they'd attacked Thames Water, and when they put out a release, it originally was aimed at them, and later on realised who it actually was. They had access to all sorts of information, access to their Opus control systems, and people like Symantec and a few others analysed the information that Klopp produced and shared, and in their opinion did say that these guys did have this level of access. They were able to prove it. So yes, they had access to those systems and provided that information to South Staffordshire Water as well. Obviously, there's two sides to every story. There's the story that these guys come up with, and there's the picture that other people paint as well. So yeah, Symantec were able to show that the user had access to the graphical workstations, and from there they had gained access to manual controls of their clean in place system. And that is a process that allows them to clear the interior surfaces of pipes, vessels, and other types of equipment without having to pull it to bits. So basically that would introduce chemicals into there, such as sodium hypochlorite, so bleach and stuff, into that water treatment system, and they could have done that. Not quite sure if these people were just, had a bit of a heart or some kind of something like that, but they did release a statement, which was, and I'll read exactly what they wrote in there initial statement, which was CLOP is not a political organisation. We do not attack critical infrastructure or health organisations. We decide we do not encrypt this company, but we show them that we have access to more than 5 terabytes of data. Every system, including SCADA, and these systems which control chemicals in water. If you are shocked, it is good. So that was part of their statement, and they went on to kind of give evidence as to the kind of access they had. So they could have done a lot more, they could have done a lot worse, and for whatever reason chose not to. So yeah, really interesting what came out of that. And as we know, there's been lots of other kind of things that have happened, certainly over the last few years, that we're going to be touching on throughout this webinar as well. Again, it's about learning from them. It's not about just going, well, something bad happened to them. Oh, something bad happened to them. Won't be happening to us. It's about learning from those, from the smallest of things that you can pick up from them and go, oh, okay, they went in that way. Maybe we should just check our system and make sure that we've got that covered to make sure that we couldn't be attacked from the same vector. So yeah, certainly in terms of CNI and SCADA systems, probably the tipping point for that was around about 2010, really. I was in a workshop and it included Stefan Veronka, who's the Director of Industrial Security Services at Siemens. And he was there at the point where Stuxnet came along. And he remembers that point really quite specifically. And for people who don't know what Stuxnet is, it was specifically designed to attack Siemens, the Step 7 software. And that controls Siemens PLCs and all sorts of things. It was specifically designed to get onto Windows machines or HMIs, look for this software, and then go digging and being able to connect to Siemens PLCs. It effectively destroyed most of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. And yet, as part of this webinar, we're not here to get all political and things like that. So I'm not going to say who allegedly was supposed to be backing that. But the upshot of that is it doesn't just concentrate on the effective target that maybe the people were designing it for. It will have other consequences as well. And it did end up being in other systems that maybe weren't initially thought about or designed to be. You know, it attacked some US systems, attacked some in Australia, etc., etc. So this was a big problem. The other problem with it is that it's not necessarily specifically designed for specific software and things like that. So a little bit of manipulation, and it could potentially be used for newer systems too. So looking at that safety aspect, in the last webinar, we introduced that CIA triad, didn't we, of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But we said that energy had that fourth consideration, which was safety, people, animals, the environment, and all that stuff that you have to consider. So yeah, in health and safety, risk assessments look at the risks, implications of those risks, how can they be reduced using those safe systems of work. And in energy and in those areas, certainly a lot of the sites that I go to, you know, health and safety and making sure we all get home at the end of the day is crucial, critical, it's everywhere. And that's fantastic. And all those compensating measures, etc. But cyber risk is a newer threat, and health and safety managers haven't really had to think about it before. You know, a Health and Safety Act came out in 1974, but the Computer Misuse Act in the UK didn't come out till 1990, quite a bit later. And of course, NIS, the EU regulations that we inherited, they're from 2018. And currently the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill, which people should go and have a look at, that is still to be fully finalised. It was kind of going through ratification and going through the governmental things. It is supposed to be being brought in 2025 this year. So let's see what happens with that. Hopefully it will be. And that's that key on that resilience. And you'll find that a lot from NCSC and others. It's about the UK upping its resilience, because it's not about if somebody's going to get attacked or an attempt at an attack, it's when. So we need to be resilient to that, both as energy sites, businesses, and as the UK. So in terms of that bill, it's obviously, we inherited NIS, but it's going to be bringing in things such as NIS 2 and certain elements of that. Certainly all the good practice that we know of, and we talked about that last time, didn't we? And the fact that these different sets of guidance and regulations and stuff, you know, they all tend to pool into the same kind of good practice, because good practice is good practice in the main. One thing that there is a big strengthening on is supply chain management. And when we look at even more of these examples, you'll see they often derive from very similar sources, and supply chain management is one of those. To 2018 regs didn't even look at that. The NCSC CAF already has supplier management as part of Principle A. And 62443, which I know a lot of people are starting to really get into and are coming to us and talk to us about it and getting us to help out with, also brought supplier management in. That's in part 4. It's in both 1 and 2. So yeah, in terms of health and safety then, no amount of safety checks, maintenance outages, equipment refreshes can solve that problem of a system that gets compromised by the systems that are supposed to be there to protect it, really. There was an attack on a German steelworks in 2014. The name of that company was never released, but their ICS system was attacked, and that interfered with the specific control components of it, which meant that blast furnace wasn't able to be shut down. And it did melt down and have a pretty catastrophic kind of effect on that. Luckily, the people managed to get out, and nobody from the public or that company were killed in that incident. But that just shows the kind of the impact. What was the kind of the start of that? Spear phishing, so specifically targeting individuals in the company, social engineering, manipulating facilities employees into revealing that security information. So yeah, going back to that again. So yeah, in terms of that overlap, certainly cybersecurity training. Maybe you some guys have done it, maybe you haven't. I'm not 100% sure on everybody's kind of backgrounds here, but health and safety and the preservation of life is key. There's an oath from ICS2 who do the CISP qualification, and a lot around ethics and things like that. As we know, sometimes for some reason, there can be a fine line between protecting the people who are just interested in trying to learn more, and then into that darker side of things, as we all know. So one of the things that's key to all of us who do work in it is ethics, and preservation of life is the top one. The preservation of the systems and all the other things come after that. So this is a question from CISP, and it's, what is the primary goal of a disaster recovery plan? And the answers could be integrity of data, preservation of your business capital, restoration of those business processes, and safety of personnel. Now, depending on your job and the way you read that question, your answers might be different. If you're the CFO, it might be the preservation of your business capital. If you're the CISO, then it might be that integrity of data and information. If you're the people like the techies, it might be making sure you can get things up and running as quickly as possible, or the restoration of your business systems and processes. But actually, at the bottom of it, personal safety. And if anyone's done any kind of cyber risk assessments, again, physical security is linked a lot, and I've spoken about some of these elements before in other webinars. But an example of that is you may have a control room, or you may have a comms room, and in the event of a problem, you've got a door that can get you out. In the event of that problem, does that door fail secure, i.e. locked, or does it fail safe? It drops and it opens. And in a super secure network, the cyber teams are like, well, we want it to be locked. We don't want anybody to come in and come and get our data or access systems. But that preservation of life should come first, so it should actually fail safe and allow that door to open. You may have a secondary boundary, fences around the perimeter, and therefore when people leave, they go into a secure part of the site to be safe. But we're saying that that fence line is actually where we protect from people coming in, not that door. So yeah, there can be contradictions, but personal safety every single time. So going back to that planning, traditionally BC and DR plans, they would not really include cyber threats in them. They would normally be things such as power failure, gas failure, water failure. So amenities, phone lines, things like that, natural disasters, flooding, lightning, all that good stuff. So yeah, it would include those things. So site and facilities managers were often one of the key kind of areas in terms of BC and DR. Health and safety teams, HR teams, public relations in some aspects, legal teams, depending on if it's chemical plants and things, or anything really, but legal teams. In the last 2 decades, IT teams have been much more heavily involved, as we know. We're like, right, okay, and then we're concentrating on servers breaking, internet going off, all those things that the IT teams suddenly have to get involved in. Physical security and social media, and the way that they kind of let the public or let people know. So cybersecurity in its own right was not really something that's been part of BC and DR. It's taught a huge amount now, like CISP. I think there's pretty much a whole domain on it now. So it's pretty big within cyber. So yeah, these BC and DR vans probably need to be reviewed and updated. And as you can see, there's BC plans and DR plans, two different things. If you still got a book this thick with it all in, time to think about it. They're slightly different things. And some of the things you need to be thinking about really and getting your business to think about as well, if they're not, is to ensure that you understand what your current RTO or your recovery time objective is. So that is the time it takes you to recover from an incident. And again, through various methods, you'll understand what that might look like for the different incidents that you might be foreseeing. And if that's not what you think it is, it's time to look at those plans. And then your RPO, your recovery point objective. So that means how much information are you prepared to lose or and still be able to recover from that. So whether that's you've got paper copies of certain things and running manuals and that's the only thing in a fire that's gone, what would that mean? If you're taking backups, depending on your backup regimes, maybe you'll lose 8 hours of data, maybe use a week's worth of data. What does that look like? So it does depend. So for example, if you've got things like a phone line going off in a BC plan, your continuity plan, that might look like something in the region of our business continuity plan is that we will get the phone lines diverted to a mobile number so we can still continue to talk to people, and we will use our social media team to go out and tell people that we've got some problems with our phone lines, but we are able to continue, and don't worry about it, you can still call us. So that's kind of what a continuity plan might look like. And then a disaster recovery for something like the phone lines is we've got that in place, and our DR is how do we deal with that phone line being down in terms of getting it back up and running, bringing BT, getting them in to sort it out, and includes the recovery process where we reverse what we did in the continuity plan. So two different things, slightly different, hence the reason why you should attack them slightly differently. Both based off that impact analysis. We've got to understand the different things, what are the problems and how we deal with them, designing those responses with our continuity plan and identifying those key roles and responsibilities, because when things aren't working, we need to make sure that people know what they're in and how to do it without panic. And we keep testing and updating those plans whenever we can. DRP is a little bit different. Okay, we're still running off that impact analysis, but we need to analyze those risks and we need to create some asset inventories, because a lot of this can be dealt, suddenly we're into worlds of insurance and all sorts of things. Understanding the cost to us for those tangible assets, so the things, the stuff, how and then there's lots of maths involved in that, understanding that, and the intangible assets, so that's the knowledge, the information, the people, and what they are, what they do, and again having those teams and roles and responsibilities so people know what to do in the event of a disaster. Testing and refining those plans, really important. So you can test those with tabletop exercises. Don't know if anyone's ever done any of those. Role play scenarios and those planned outages that some of you have, you know, that might be a good time to not only do those maintenance checks and things that you all do, but also it's a good time to maybe introduce full interruption tests. So, okay, we're going to have a scenario where, yes, you're going to turn things off because you do that as part of your outage, but what about simulating what would happen to if a certain thing or an element or a system would be brought down? What would that look like to play out and actually do that while you're in your outage? Really good time to do it. So looking at the nature of cyber threats across sectors, there's something to learn from all sectors. There's lots of things that kind of have parity across the different sectors. So this graphic here shows the number of weekly attacks per organization by sector. This particular chart comes from Checkpoint. They do an annual cybersecurity report every year, and this is the one for 2025. There's lots of people that create these types of reports, including the government's DSIT, so the Department for Science, Information and Technology. They survey about 3,000 UK businesses to get an understanding of things. So this gives an indication of the number of attacks that happened in 2024. And we can see some ones that, you know, clearly the motivation is monetary. So business, financial services, those types of things, they're up there, you know, plus 30 and plus 71% and things like that. Politically motivated with governments and things like that. And then energy, you can see there, is up at 42%. So rising. Big part of that are things like advanced persistent threats like Volt Typhoon. Threat actors backed by large countries that are attacking critical infrastructure. Sadly, education's up there, probably because it's an easy target. Users with little or no training, little budget for improvement or monitoring. And yeah, if some of the organisations in the UK, and we're aware of those in the news in terms of schools, if they have cyber essentials in place, could it be that 92% of those attacks could be reduced? You know, that's the thing to look at, and the help that maybe businesses can do with skills to help them out a little bit as well. Yeah, one that isn't standing out there, and people would note, is retail. And it's probably fair to say that if we have a look at this report next year, and we'll bring it back round and have a look, that retail might figure in there a little bit more, especially what's been happening in the last 3 months. So yeah, 2025 up to now may be remembered for the attack on retail. So people are aware of M&S and things that happened to them. Attack on their systems, done via their own system support teams. The kind of root cause, again, social engineering again, I'm afraid. So OSINT, so that is research using overt sources. So researching on people using LinkedIn, find out where they work, start looking at their Facebook, their other things. Can we get other information like their phone number? Then we can go ahead and give their phone company a call and pretend that we've broken, you know, our SIM card's failed and get the SIM swapped over. Now we've got their SIM. Okay, now we go ring the help desk and say, hi, I've forgotten my password. Can you just send me the information? Yeah, I'll send you a code via SMS. Got the SMS, get the password, we're now into the system, and we can use exploitive vulnerabilities to elevate our access. So again, social engineering, big one. 52 hours in the system they spent in that thing. And M&S themselves have estimated about £300 million in lost profit, not takings, profit. Co-op was a similar attack, same people, very similar vector. Interestingly, and this is a good point and a good learning point from this, is that they didn't have anywhere near the name level of attack that that M&S did, and probably what helped them was SOC capability, because M&S, as we said, 52 hours in the system, the co-op realised almost immediately and pulled a bunch of plugs. So their ability to get back online has been a little bit easier. Yes, they're going to still take due diligence. They're still going to take time to get themselves back up and running, but they're getting themselves back online, and that's partly because of that. So some of the learning, again, it's not about just pointing fingers and laughing or whatever we want to do. It's serious, and it's looking at what can we learn from that. So if you've got people that are in your tech teams, technical teams, reviewing your password reset process. If somebody rings up and asks for their password to be reset, is that how it's done? Do we need to go, actually, if you've got a password that needs resetting, you need to come into the office, you need to come in person to have that done. Stop using SMS for MFA. In the cyber world, we don't consider SMS a secure form of communications anymore. For MFA, for password sharing, you know, I'm still getting businesses who want to share a VPN password via SMS, not secure anymore. Using cameras when you're in Teams meetings sounds silly, and I know people are introverts and don't like cameras, but sometimes there's reasons for it. It helps us to ensure that the person on the other end is actually who they say they are. Yeah, and yeah, we're talking about why those higher threats higher in energy, threat to life, as we said, but there's other areas that also have threat to life, isn't there? And those threats to life come from different sources. Some of those are direct, so an incident on your site could impact your staff, local people around you, and the environment. And indirect ones, such as you create energy. You know, if we look at what happened down at Heathrow Airport, that impact on transport services and the chaos could affect hospitals. There's lots of direct and indirect issues there. At the Cyber UK 2025. I was in a plenary, which you can go look up on YouTube. Just search for Cyber UK 2025 Open Plenary, and you'll find it. And Kieran Devan, who was the chair of the, well, he still is the chair of the Health Service Exec in Ireland, basically the same as our NHS. They had a massive problem in 2021. just a simple email with an Excel file attached. It essentially took down all their systems. The whole of Ireland, every hospital, every doctor's surgery, the whole thing gone. A lot of that was a mixture of the actual attack, which was WannaCry, taking out systems. The rest, it was down to the fact that you just shut it all down. That was linked back to the Wizard Spider group in Russia. But yeah, one of the biggest kind of things was, he said, the first priority wasn't cyber per se, it was how do we keep people alive? And the room just went silent. You were just like, wow, you know, and there was quite a bit of emotion in that too, because of that. So yeah, they got a lot of help from people around them. Our own NCSC helped those guys out too, but they estimated the cost of that was about 100 million euros. But absolutely everything. Couldn't check blood tests, no idea what patients were coming in, couldn't check anything. So yeah, really a sobering thing that we could all take away from and go, right, okay, you know, how do we learn from that? So how are we helping people? Well, obviously spoke to people, you know, said last time that we do supply and help people out and provide secure networks, including the connectivity, security between systems on site, and providing secure access for your O&M guys, for your maintenance partners and people like that, helping you out with that impact analysis. I can tell I'm over by a minute and people are looking at me at my end, but we'll get wrapped up. But yeah, risk mitigation, looking at that. And that includes things such as, you know, in wind farms and in other areas, people look a lot at things such as the connectivity of O&Ms, looking at how do we get maintenance partners in, how do we secure that, what VPNs do we use, the technologies and the security. We're currently looking at how do we safely secure other connectivity between, such as onshore substations to offshore platforms. You know, there's pieces of fiber optic going under the sea. Just because they're under the sea doesn't make them secure, does it? You know, so we're looking at all connectivity here and helping people out with it. Defining those security policies with people as well if they're unsure about what to do about it, and defining those employer requirements if need be if people are at tender stage. But what's really key and important for us is really, and for me as well personally, is just ensuring that you're safe and as secure and as resilient as you can be, really. So yeah, we are ever so slightly over time by 2 minutes, but there were some really key points and really important things I want to kind of share with people today. So yeah, if we do have any questions, we might have time for the odd one. Dylan, if there's anyone brought any questions in.
Yeah, we've got a couple, but we'll keep it short. The first one is the RTO based on sector or rather upon incident instead?
Yeah, so things like RPO and things like that are specific to an incident, so they're not sector specific. So you'd be looking as part of your impact analysis and go, okay, what kind of assets are the ones that we need to look at protecting the most, and then from there looking at the scenarios and looking at what you need to do to protect them and to make them resilient. So and then from there you can work out what your time to bring those things back online are. So it's very much down to the scenarios that you and the criticality of whatever assets that you've got.
And then on a similar note, so are there, regarding RPO, are there industry standards or regulations to abide by, or is it company specific and company generated?
So some of the controls, as part, you do big business impact analysis, like we said, and then you do your cyber risk assessments, and they will look at the way you're intending to do things or the way you do things, depending on the stage you're at with your site. If it's a new site, obviously, then it's different. We're doing it off paper sometimes. You would be looking at those, and then you'll be looking at your controls that you're putting in place. A good design system should have minimal kind of things and mitigations put on top, because it should be bound into what you're doing, really. But you would do that exercise. So those will help to two things, maybe govern to a certain degree, but certainly maybe get you to think about it. Because if you do a risk analysis and you're like, okay, that's our risk, and you need to look at that risk and you go, well, are we okay with it? Is the board okay with it? Is everybody okay with it? And if they're not, then that's what makes you change, really, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions. So
okay,
thank you. That was an absolutely fantastic webinar, and I'm sure everyone learned loads from that.
Fantastic. Yeah, our next webinar will be in August. So yeah, again, we'll be looking latest tech innovations, what's going on in cybersecurity and things that affect the energy sector. So yeah, we'll be back on the 21st of August. So yeah, thank you very much.